Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome to the committee. Appreciate your testimony today. I want to join my colleague from Iowa, Mr. Young, in echoing his concerns about the agriculture economy, and I appreciated your responses there and the dialogue you have. And when you look at ag income down 56% over 3 years, which has been mentioned in this hearing, it's concerning to a lot of us. I come from a long line of farmers. I grew up in rural Kansas on a farm, and my grandparents farmed the same farm, and you know that's part of the tradition and American heritage. I grew up in the 80s when you mentioned the 80s. You know, those are tough times, and I remember neighbors, going bankrupt, and it can look rosy one day. It's just like, the crops in general. It can look rosy one day, and the next day it can't. And so I'm concerned about it, and I want to ensure that we do everything we can to protect the rural way of life and protect farmers to ensure they can provide a consistent food supply, which allows us to put food on the table for the SNAP program and other things. I also wanted to echo Mr. Valadeo's concerns that he raised, that I know you answered his question regarding crop insurance. Last year the House and the Congress passed a bill that made temporary reduction to crop insurance. That, of course, is something that many of us opposed. Does not set well with farmers who feel that this is a tough time. And I just want to always echo to you on behalf of farmers in Kansas how important that crop insurance program is. And I know you expressed support for it, but we would certainly not be supporting additional cuts that have been recommended in the tune of $18 billion over the next decade. I wanted to turn your attention a little bit to the rules and regulations that affect farmers, and I know you've been at this a long time. You hear from these folks just like I do. They feel under assault from the EPA, from various government agencies, and I guess I want to know, as it relates to these regulations that ultimately increase the cost of agriculture, which makes it more expensive for all of our constituents to buy groceries in their markets. Where's the USDA on the Waters of the U.S. rule? You support it, you oppose it. What's the USDA doing to ensure that farmers have a voice in that process and they are being represented as the administration makes these types of decisions?
Congressman, I come from a state that is currently dealing with a very serious circumstance involving farming and water quality. The Des Moines Water Works, and Congressman Young knows this very well, has sued 3 drainage districts in northwest Iowa, alleging that they have failed to properly conduct their business, and the result of it is that water users in the city of Des Moines are incurring greater expense as a result. That is now before the federal courts, and I'm very concerned about that. Very concerned that a federal judge may decide that case, and in doing so may create rules, regulations, and directions for producers that will be extremely difficult to comply with. So I've obviously been urging an effort on the part of the state to work with us to create a much more aggressive conservation effort, a voluntary conservation effort. This underscores the dynamic that's out there. It isn't just farmers who are concerned about all of these issues. We now are beginning to see water, wastewater treatment operations begin to raise this issue. So I think from my perspective, USDA's responsibility is to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that resources from conservation are put in place, that they're put in place in a strategic way, that they're put in place in the critical watersheds in a landscape scale approach that we can actually positively impact and affect water quality and water quantity. EPA's got its own responsibilities. We obviously provide our input, but I'm not in a position to tell a sister agency what they could or should not do. I can provide them input in terms of how I believe what they are thinking about doing will impact and affect folks that I'm responsible for, which we have done and which we'll continue to do on a variety of issues, not just this one. But I will tell you that this is an issue, the issue of water quality is an issue that is bubbling up through the surface here, no pun intended. And I think it is going to be absolutely extremely important for us to use our conservation programs in a very strategic and thoughtful way. That's why this Regional Conservation Partnership Program is so important.
Well, and I appreciate that, Mr. Secretary, and I think the concern is that many times these federal regulations like WOTUS don't really take into consideration how difficult it is to implement and taking little streams on a farmer's land and I've heard from my home builders, it creates all sorts of complications and expenses. And what we don't realize is that makes it that much harder on farmers who are trying to survive in this economy. It makes it that much harder to keep agriculture costs down, which ultimately end up hit the pocketbook of all of our constituents. Lastly, I'd just say as a follow-up, what regulations and new mandates should we expect in the final year of this administration that you are aware of? You know, often in either party, last year's administrations mean fast-paced new things that they're trying to get in before the end of the deadline. What's the USDA aware of? What's coming down the pike that farmers and agriculture world should be concerned about?
I can just speak for my department. We're focused on trying to finish the work that has begun that we think is important. There are some issues that are in the organic world that I know that some representatives are very interested in that we're going to try to finish. In terms of other issues, there are always issues involving pesticides and chemicals that we're keeping an eye on, but I don't know that there's any quote-unquote new thing that we're going to try to rush through the process. I think from my perspective, what we're going to try to do is do what we've done well and make sure that it's grounded and institutionalized so it continues and complete the work that we think is feasible and possible to be completed, and recognizing that future administrations can easily overturn regulations that are passed in the last minute. That's not my intent. My intent is to finish the job I started.
Thank you. Let me switch over to the